what he said in one of the interviews. He goes, no one believes me when I said I donated dark because no one believes anyone would be like, everyone wants the credit for donating. No one believes that I just do it on the sly. Pilfering FTX, the customer deposits, and was using it in Alameda Research, which was his trading firm, to try to make extra money, and he lost it.
And so this is all because it's on.
So the person's not named in the report who is donating to Democrats. We know the one donating to Republicans was Ryan Salami, but that person eventually, like investment funds, they invested in a bunch of NFT projects. Mark Andreessen, I think, is the guy who runs it. Want to store your money somewhere else? How do you store it? So there's this idea of like these alternative currencies that are kind of interesting. And then there's some arguments that like, hey, if you're someone like me, everyone loses confidence. Everyone sells their FTT tokens. No one wants to buy it. It's worth nothing.
So how did this all fall apart?
Great question. So he lost it on the platform. He says the 18 million was on FTX or whatever, and he never got $1 out of it. But that was what the deal was for.
It's amazing that things with this amount of money can get this far sideways before anyone knows what's going on.
This is the problem with offshore accounts and stuff. Like service that said you cannot move. Like when I deposit with you, you're not going to touch my money. And I said, Sam, if that's true, where's the money of all these people? That is his background. And so I asked, Sam, I was like, what does it say if this is your chief regulatory officer? This guy said, well, hey, can we restructure all this money that went through me like a loan so that we can, say that I took a loan out and I was donating so we didn't violate any laws? They never ended up doing that. I have 2 employees, and both of them are overseas. Like one of them's in London, one of them's in Ukraine. And so for me, I have to pay them, and I have to do all these other guys buy into him.
Right.
And then they themselves are kind of also looking at each other, being like, well, that guy did it. Like, what? It's the hottest deal.
So when I see something like that go down, I'm like, how did he get Steven Spielberg? How does someone like a Bernie Madoff or Sam Bankman-Fried, how does he get these people to do this?
Reasons that our banks have a bunch of anti-money laundering laws. There's a reason that they have all sorts of finance laws. It's not for their safety. It's for your safety. I mean, it's like they need to shocking thing. And I think that shows, like, if you're running a shady empire, like, who's better than a shady lawyer to try to help you cover it up, right?
How did you get in?
Because every day it's getting less valuable. So the question is, what do you do if you're in that country making money? If you want your hands in both pockets. But publicly, he's just like, he's donating to Democrats because he says, oh, I'm like this, like, I care about all these issues.
Yeah.
But it's like even more cynical than just buying one party. Don't invest. Like, that's a bad idea.
People were calling bullshit, though. Just like they were calling, there was a few people that were wary that were calling bullshit on Bernie Madoff, and there was a few.
He's like, well, like, think of it like a box. And, you tell a bunch of investors, hey, if you put money in this box, we can get some money out. We Ethereum, what are we tracking here? And then it goes to some mixer somewhere, and then we don't know where it goes after that.
So when Sam Bankman-Fried was working with
now I can just send you $100K. It's going to take me 5 minutes.
So that's why when people kidnap people's data and things along those lines, they'd like to get paid.
Victims would reach out to me. They'd be like, hey, I'd been scammed by this guy, and I didn't realize what was going on. And you showed me, sort of like how the whole scheme worked. It's sort of like hard. You kind of have to disprove every single – like there's always a new like health guy telling you that there's some new alternative discovery, whatever. And I was like, this is kind of weird. And I was like, why do they –
regulators when he was trying to impose regulations or encourage regulations, how could that have benefited him as opposed to Binance? Like what could they have possibly done to make it easy on and a lot of ums and ahs and you just kept on him? It was amazing that he felt like he could
not actually like this incredible business that you thought it was, that you're going to get rich easily. So don't do that. Go do crypto. You got to get into crypto now. And then it became find out like there were just no adults in that room, and like the few adults that there were like, they had like a criminal lawyer. Well, anyway, I don't think he's actually been convicted of anything. I shouldn't say that. They had this guy, Dan Freaks, left. And ultimately, because they had lost billions of dollars, it left billions of dollars in credit claims, basically. They didn't have the money, right? It's all at some address. And so people were asking, like, you say you have all this Bitcoin, where's the Bitcoin? You say you have all this Ethereum, where's the Ethereum? Act that bill, and now that it was all a fraud, or the guy who basically pushed it was a fraud, now they're like trying to retool it, all these other wallets, that it's impossible to know which of those new wallets my dollar's from. It's like, it's just crazy. It's a crazy idea. Eventually got paid out like $2 billion.
Whoa.
Yeah. Some of it was in this FTT token, though. So they have a bunch of FTT, right? And so it's like November was when all, or with just put a bunch of garlic cloves in the pot. I still remember our house like reeked. She would put 60 cloves of garlic in in a stew. And it's like, well, what's fungibility mean? It means whether you were a guy withdrawing who was this degenerate day trader, you put $100,000 into this little mixer, and then it sends $100,000 out later, and nobody knows where that money came from.
What is a mixer? How does it work?
It's interesting. So the most famous example is Tornado Cash. Fine. And then FTX US went bankrupt, and he's the one who put it into bankruptcy. And then he's telling everyone, oh, no, the money's actually still there. I mean, he was constantly giving a conflicting narrative. Executives, Ryan Salami or something. I think that's his last name. Salami. I don't know. I just don't know how to pronounce it. But he was like, yeah, the number 3 donor to the Republican Party. But it was all orchestrated through Sam, what that was, to hide it from people who were trying to take a look at his books. But it's just, that's what I mean by black box. You never know what games these guys are playing. Like they say, oh, here's sort of like the rough estimate of our balance. So I decided to start pursuing it step by step. And at first it was like just me discovering like, well, what is this? Well, how does this scheme work? Okay, so I buy this course and then what? 5 minutes or 3 minutes. So I don't want to give off the idea that like there's nothing here. But the problem is that with the
party.
That's right, but
also to the Republicans.
This is what's wild. So
yeah,
Sam knew publicly in our current American climate, like
how does a guy like that not wind up getting indicted?
I ask myself that every day. so many.
Is it a matter of time, or is it he's?
So they were paying everybody to promote this FTX crypto exchange, and the idea was this is the next big thing, right? And this is where you're going to make money.
What is it's a crypto exchange, right? So
yeah,
how does that work?
So the first question is when you learn about crypto, you know it's kind of too good to be true, but the social proof is overwhelming, and it overwhelms your kind of like alarm bells. So the social proof is a combination of things. So first of all, it's like crypto is sometimes national currencies aren't a great idea and you want an alternative. So like look at the Turkish lira. The problem is when at the exact moment FTX can't pay you back is the exact moment that FTT becomes worthless. So you think you have all this collateral. Actually, campaign finance laws I've heard are pretty weak. I forget the name of the law, but it was passed in like the early 2000s, 2010s maybe, where it actually became very easy to donate dark, where it's like you can donate through super PACs, political action committees, and you can donate as much as you want, and you don't have to be, your name has to appear nowhere. And so that's actually his whole technique of shifting the blame like onto Alameda and like I don't control Alameda. I've seen something very similar. I'm investigating this Ponzi scheme that's offshore stuff. You're just having to trust these shady offshore entities that they're telling the truth. Binance says they're fine. They show proof of reserves, but what are their liabilities? You do not get to that level and not know that things were wrong.
Well, reading her tweets about amphetamine use was pretty wild, too. The whole scene was wild.
Appreciate your transparency. Kind of kissing up a little bit. But I was just like, somebody has to ask him some real questions. So I had 2 prior little Twitter space interactions with him, and he kept getting away with the fact that really taking that, I mean, maybe some of them were taking it seriously, but not enough.
So if FTX didn't encourage regulation, and CZ didn't get upset at that.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like people get away with it. It's just there's too many people doing it. And you'll catch some people, but ultimately a lot of people will just basically skate by, even though by all rights they should have been.
Figured it out, and someone would have started dumping their coin.
Yeah, people already, I mean, even leading up, like CZ gets a lot of the credit for it, but like already, like a day before TT. So it looks like, if you just look at their assets, it looks like they're covering their liabilities. They owe customers $10 billion. Looks like they have $10 billion. But like, that's the issue, was FTX's problem was not CZ. Ultimately, he's kind of the guy who like pushed over the house made this thing. So all this money's going in, and then you basically wait. And as you're waiting, Ethereum's going out everywhere. A bunch of people are withdrawing, right? Because they're also taking their money out.
Right.
By the time the account, fiat at FTX. And so what prosecutors are now arguing is he knew, of course, what it was. He deliberately obscured. The money system has to be safe. Like, your grandma has to be able to charge back her credit card when there's a fraudster, right? Like, or this whole thing doesn't work. You can't rely on people being technically savvy in order to...
Don't really understand what's going... Like, the FTX thing, for example, is the best one. Because I was so in the dark about this thing. I was like, what is happening? Like, what are they doing? Try to break it down for us. Like, first of all...
You know, there were things that were coming out, like questions about, okay, they say they have all this money. Where on chain is it? So like the blockchain, everything's publicly, you can see it. I didn't really know what I was looking at the time. Then I go to college and all my friends get an MLMs, multi-level marketing, sort of like, just like hey, you're going to get rich. So I was always getting invited to these like get rich seminars. To like, if you're Alameda Research and you're funneling money through a personal investor, that I think is the problem. Their story broke that showed that maybe they're not as healthy as they should be. There would have been a run on the banks and people would have found out. It's just like, when are they going to find out? He happened to be the final straw, if that makes sense.
So someone would have
give you this yield. He starts explaining like this thing that sounds exactly like a Ponzi scheme. And so ultimately, Matt Levine's like, yeah, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. But again, it stops short. Tom Brady backs him. Well, Tom Brady's got to have some guys who are looking into this. And then it's like, well, BlackRock backed him. Well, BlackRock definitely has some guys who looked into it.
Right.
It's Sequoia Capital. They said he was you think you have this backstop because on the books it's worth, X dollars. Let's say it's like worth $5 a coin. But what you're not realizing is the real risk is when FTX can't pay you back, they probably can't pay anyone back $10 million or your data's lost forever. And you're like, call the police and you go, hey, track this guy. And they're like, to what? To a Bitcoin wallet? To do these trades that are profitable in crypto. So the way he first made his money was he did something where he bought Bitcoin in the U.S. and then he sold it on these Japanese. Most of this $10 billion is just their own tokens. So CZ takes this opportunity to kind of spread some, sort of information about that. He says, hey, we're actually success. 2 months. You're going to be making 5 figures a month. 10 months, maybe 6 figures a month. And I've done it for people before. That's the social proof. I've shown people how to do this. And basically like, shell games where you're hiding the money.
Yeah.
You're saying, oh, invest in this. This is going to become valuable later. But you actually own a bunch. If you're from this one, you're not okay. Or I might say, hey, like CZ has connections to China. Like maybe that's a problem. Or CZ has connections to here. Maybe that's a big deal. There was a lot of fear of missing out or FOMO in the markets at the time. Everyone thought, oh, cryptos, you have to get in now, right? Because if you get in now...
Views about what? Like you didn't start doing this. You started doing just like a normal interview show?
I was just doing a normal interview show with a few of my buddies. And it's like sort of what's left after the guy who kind of was spearheading this bill like was a fraud. It's kind of tough. I was actually randomly like some of these people making hundreds of millions of dollars. People are miserable at the end of it, and nothing happens. And that was the start of my show.
So you start just doing interviews.
And then he goes into the crypto space, and he launches FTX.
He's very young, right? How old is he?
I think he is young. I'm not... Maybe you can look that up, Jamie. 31. at the end when you're like ready for this thing to go down, because I know as soon as I get on, it's going to end pretty quickly after. I said, let me on. Let me ask him some real hard questions. Because all these guys are like, Sam, we were with regulators. They were all Sam was working really closely with regulators to try to get regulations passed. And CZ felt like he was cut out. So that stirred up this like battle between them. And ultimately, Sam goes, oh, you won like our battle. And people were like, is it a battle when you lose billions of dollars of customers? What are you saying in the terms of service that means that I can't sue you? You have all these terms of service that basically say none of what I'm saying is true. Like they say they can get you rich in the sales pitch, and then and it just was kind of I was just trying to find my way. I was just trying to like even before that I had done a show where I was like trying to break down these topics. I was like, what they wanted to store some Bitcoin with Tom Brady. They wanted to be alongside Tom Brady. So he's like, well, there was fungibility between wallets. You can't do that and then say, oops, I played a little too much of my video games and lost billions of dollars. Like, this doesn't fly.
Well, he wasn't saying that I played the video games and that's why I lost the money.
But or you were a grandma who just put one Bitcoin on there, or, more likely the grandson. He treated all the accounts the same. So when everyone came running for the money, they just withdrew until nothing was. This is what was going on in crypto. They're called collateralized loans. But what FTX was doing was they were saying, hey, like, we'll take $1 million from you, but instead of giving you...
Why the celebrities are important. And that's why...
Huge part of it.
The connection to BlackRock is important.
Huge part. Yes. Because they're the legitimacy that says, hey, I'm, to expose, but like, I'm interested in the characters who perpetuate fraud because they're such interesting psychological case studies. Sam Bankman-Fried, you could probably write a whole book about, there were some margin trading accounts. And I'm like, no, but there were people who didn't trade with margin. There were people who just put their money with you. And all they wanted, which thankfully she did, and she's fine now. She takes medication to replace the hormones her thyroid would generate. But I saw my mom kind of get swept in this thing that I knew was nonsense. But okay, so this is funny. They found his League of Legends account. And during some of the calls after it was a fraud, you could hear him clicking in the background. Click, 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 click. He's playing League. After the fact, he's like he's still playing video games, and you're like, can you have the decency to get off the video game and talk to people?
So bizarre. It's just so bizarre. I really enjoyed you catching him on Twitter Spaces. I really enjoyed that. I listened to that whole thing because before that, you have this guy who's this, one guy who lost a hard drive and who's paying people to go through a landfill to try to find his hard drive because there's billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin on that hard drive.
Yeah, people lose their other friends. They're all saying it's okay. Let me put money in, and it's just a huge case study that just because other people. His whole thing was he did this thing with Ultimate Bet. So he was one of the lawyers. So there's this poker site called Ultimate Bet. And he got caught in this scandal where they had enabled this thing called scandal. Now is they're finding a bunch of campaign finance violations because he was trying to influence politics, U.S. politics. I mean, it's insane how deep companies, so they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, like 100x leverage for a while. But so I eventually pivoted into this crypto direction and learned all about that. But it started just from a curiosity about scammers. And I wanted somebody to say everything. I don't have access to the book. Like, I basically knew nothing. So anytime you'd call him out on an issue, you'd say, where's the money? He goes, well, I don't know. It's gone. It's Alameda Research. Ask Alameda. A lot of people found out about crypto at the same time the mainstream media, everyone else did. So by the time they're actually investing,
it's too late.
It's too late. I think the most fair case you could make about lack of regulation and the ability to send peer-to-peer, which means you and I can just send money to each other directly, no middleman. There's also a really huge opportunity for fraud, scams. They bring on people like Tom Brady to promote it. Larry David in the Super Bowl. They kind of get buy-in from all these big sort of names, and also literally had a $10 billion account that he mislabeled with Alameda Research.
Mislabeled?
Yeah, in the terms of service, they said results may vary. What's that about?
Mm.
I mean, ultimately, it's like, and so I realized, like, oh, there's this sophisticated way that they're preying on my psychology, and
it was like 70,000 or something like
60 plus, yeah.
So that's the lure. The lure is you buy in for pennies, and one day you're insanely rich. I'm sure you know about that
guy who enabled God, or who helped cover up God mode, and he's like, well, I don't want to comment on other people, or it's just like,
well, how does he skate on that? Like how
something? Because I was just like, why does this make some people tens of millions of dollars and nothing happens? Why are on your dollars or whatever, euros or whatever, and you put it into this crypto exchange? They have a bank, and they work with that bank, then they exchange. It's inevitable. So something to understand. FTX was insolvent long before it was realized that they were insolvent. Right? So that you withdraw, there's nothing tying your Ethereum to your particular address to like this random external address, because you send it to a different one. Abilities, it's hard to know. So people really just take you at face value, and they have to trust that, like, oh, other people are invested, so I guess I'll jump in too.
And that's what. Jamie's looking it up.
I thought I knew it off the top of my head, and now I don't want to say the wrong one. A16Z.
A16. Sort of, this is a fraud because, no one knew. There's a bunch of backing. So I made a video at the time being like, this crypto CEO just describes a Ponzi scheme.
And probably overly confident.
Yeah, it's pretty clear he didn't see like the full scope of the situation, especially at first. It seemed like he thought, he was like saying FTX US was these exchanges where it was worth more. So he was arbitraging this difference in prices. And then after he made his money that way, he
and sell off all his tokens. Would they be still solvent today, or still in operation today? Would they not crash? No. Or was this an analogy for losing your house?
What's funny? Yeah.
I mean, good Lord.
The idea of these mixers was you'd anonymize your transactions. So, like, let's say I knew all the crypto people were trying to control regulations to favor their individual business situation. And so CZ felt like he was being cut out in Washington.
Or is it just pure addiction? I think, those multiplayer games, those, online role-playing games, that's what that is, right? It's like
I think is it a MOBA? How you're going to make some money. And so people invested in FTX thinking that this is going to be a safe platform. This kid is smarter than everyone else. He cleaned up on all his own customers, just basically taking their money. Like, oh, I know exactly when to fold. I know exactly when to bet. So he had God mode enabled, and then they found out Coinbase. It seems like they're, legitimate, but so much of the problem with crypto is we don't know how much of this stuff is money laundering. We don't know how much of this stuff is like gay. So like, can you do this?
So someone had to be gay to do it? Like,
no. Basically, they were like, we need someone trustworthy we can trust to do this. So hey, you're going to be the guy. Like you have $1, I'll let you trade with $100, and that's going to be like one reason you come to my offshore exchange. I can offer you more leverage than the guys who are like, lateral like dollars or like some asset. We'll give you FTT tokens, which is their own invented coin, and that should have value if anything goes wrong. And people were accepting that as value. Washington, and I think there was like a tweet from Sam saying like, oh, like I'll see you the next time you're in Washington or something like that. But like, it was kind of a dig because he knows CZ can't go to Washington. Like he would be.
Did you interview him before the scandal?
No, not before the scandal.
So it's like as it was going down.
As it was going down, he goes on all these Twitter spaces. He doesn't want to. He's doing interviews with that, and she would drink it up because she thought that would make her better. Ultimately, my dad convinced her, like, you got to get the surgery. Like this ain't gonna fly. You have to, ultimately get the surgery. So he decides to donate dark to Republicans. And part of the accusation is he knowingly did this through one of his is not surgery. You can just treat it naturally. Just don't worry about, hey, don't listen to the doctors. Don't listen to your general practitioner. you can just treat it with like colloidal silver.
Regulated, like if he was doing this, like Coinbase can't do this. Is that correct?
Yeah, Coinbase is much more heavily scrutinized. They actually have to file with the SEC. So we were warning people, hey, this is probably insolvent, get your money out. But CZ ultimately was the big, like, he was the most notorious and, like, well-respected. Somebody found out about this God mode. And so the lawyers, like, how do we basically cover this up? Dan Friedberg's like, how do we, what do you want me to do? And he's like, hey, FTT tokens and pay everybody out.
Oh, that's what he thought? He's on amphetamines, right? So he can't be thinking totally clearly.
Calling that a fraud early. I have a buddy of mine. He goes by Dirty Bubble Media on Twitter. He's like one of the Anon Twitter accounts. He was calling it a fraud. We're just going to do a few transactions through your name. That just came out in a press release. It's the new charges. He was basically like they call them straw donors, because it's like, if I give money to you to give a person in the space, to where people thought, okay, well, if he's saying it, he's a guy who only says positive things about crypto because he's a crypto executive. So if he's saying there might be problems, there's probably some problems.
But
they have to say what they have, where they're putting their money. They're subject to more regulation about like how they take care of customer deposits. One of the big things with FTX was they told people, hey, you put your money with us, we're not going to touch it, we're not going to move it. That's what FTX kept making the videos, and ultimately they never did. But I start doing that, and after I cover get-rich-quick schemes for a while, crypto keys all the time. I mean, it's kind of an interesting idea where you go, I'm going to get in before everyone else. But your issue is that anytime there's demand for withdrawals, you're going to encounter problems. So it was going to be inevitable anytime any store LGBTQ plus causes. And it was through a guy, and the guy was like, I feel a little uncomfortable with this. And they said, well, we don't have anyone trustworthy at FTX we can donate through whose money system. I mean, yeah, especially in our modern age, I mean, it seems like you can understand where they're coming from, the average person. Where's the money? I don't know. But he controls everything. And so it's like this is the tactic of these offshore companies is like you put the Z on Twitter. I probably butchered his name, but he was actually originally sort of an ally of Sam. So he invested in FTX early on, put $100 million in, and
down because it seems like they received additional scrutiny, right? Because now people are starting to look at it, and I saw that their value went down considerably.
Yeah, just make this problem go away. This is the CEO. Like, go blame it on somebody else. Go blame it on some third party that got access to our website. Say it was like a glitch or something. And so that I went to school for chemical engineering and hated it. I was miserable. I was like, I do not want my life to be earning 2% more of a bottom line for ExxonMobil or any around, right? Kevin O'Leary's in, so you kind of think you're swimming safely with like other savvy investors, and that's what ultimately gets you to buy in. Bernie Madoff is very similar. Money to a politician on my behalf. You're a straw donor. You're not really a donor. So Alameda was using customer funds to pay off politicians in order to try to get favorable. They kind of shut down. Myself and some other people were saying, like, we think they're insolvent because we had taken a look at their numbers and we said, there's no way they have the money for this. They don't have the tokens. Then he comes up, prep school. He's kind of like built for success, right? He goes to MIT, goes to Jane Street as this quantitative trader. But I'm from the Bahamas and I'm American, so that might be fine. I mean, everyone's always interested in the regulations benefiting them. The challenge now, though, is a lot of people had annoying. So like the famous example is like Coinbase is in America and they have to file all these forms. They're a regulated entity. They're publicly traded money. Like, well, how can you view this as a battle? Like, but he viewed it as like we're sparring partners, like, and you won this round or you won the war
because he thinks this is going to go on forever.
And ultimately, one of the ways, like, even some of the candidates they donated to were through like a third employee we didn't even know about, and they were like donating through him for like all these. He's a shark. He knows what he's doing.
What was the conflict between the two of them that led him to do that?
The conflict was, it's a great question. The conflict was ultimately that Sam was trying to get some regulations passed, and he
gotten away with it.
So many of these scams are like these issues of either regulators not having time, not having the resources, and go start trading with it. Unless, obviously we have FDIC insurance, stuff like that. But they didn't have that. They just take your money, go trade with it, and that's where the disaster started. I put let's say I have Ethereum, one Ether into this mixer, right? This pool of money. A bunch of people are putting one Ethereum into. So before, it's if I send you $1 and then you send that dollar on, we can easily trace that back to me, right? It's here, here. But if I send $1 to you and everyone's sending you $1, and then you're sending $1 to all, he'd be afraid of being indicted, or I don't really understand why he can't go, but he can't go to America. So Sam was meeting with regulators. CZ felt cut out, he